All right, so this is a follow-up actually to the video that I put out yesterday, which was talking about altered dominant chords, or actually an alternative to thinking about chords as altered dominant chords, thinking of them as just 5 chords in the key, no alterations involved. So what I want to do now is talk about a little bit more about that in context by looking at this tune, Blue and Green, because it has a lot of dominant chords in it that we might think of as altered, but just because of the way they look on the chart. So for instance, this chord here, A7 sharp 9, is sharp 9. Is that an alteration? Here again, here. Okay. And the other thing I want to talk about in this video is the idea of directionality in the chord progression. So understanding how the chords want to move, because I think one of the stumbling blocks for people learning about improvisation is that we get into a thing of assigning a chord to each scale. So you might say for this chord, G minor, that, okay, it's G minor 7, it's got this 13, maybe that implies G Dorian. Then we got this other chord, A7 sharp 9, come up with some scale for that, and so on and so forth. But what that doesn't tell you anything about are two things. One, the key that we're in, how these chords are related to each other, and where we have moments in the progression where we have a sense of tension and a sense of resolution. So we're going to look at both of those things. So first of all, let's think about this idea of the direction of the progression first. So what I'm getting at here is analyzing the harmony. Okay, so let's just work through it. So if we look at the tune here, Blue and Green. So if I just go that far, those are the first 3 chords of the tune. So what key is this tune in? So I'm going to say the tune is actually in D minor. And the first part of this progression is a 4-5-1 progression. G minor is 4. A7 is 5. And D minor is 1. All right. And so we want to think of that as like a harmonic chunk, okay? And what we're going to do is when we develop lines to play over that, we want the line itself to reflect some of that sense of direction, playing towards the point of resolution, playing towards that D minor, that 1 chord. But let's keep looking at some of the rest of the progression here. So once again, G minor, A7, 5 chord, 1, and then we're going to do this D flat, which is really just a passing bass note, I think. And then this part is interesting. So it's like C minor, F7, and then B flat major. So that looks like a 2-5-1 going to B flat major. And it is, but this B flat chord, and it is a sort of a moment of resolution, that B flat chord. But the B flat chord actually then has it's like a dual function chord, we call it. Because in addition to landing and feeling resolved momentarily, that then moves to A7, which then is going to resolve to our D minor. So D minor is our 1 again, right? So in that case, once we kind of work backwards, so B flat to A to D. So that's like A is the 5, D is the 1, and B flat major is like a flat 6 major chord going to 5, going to 1. So flat 6 major is coming back. Now we can think of that as coming from the key of D minor. So in a way, it's a different. When we saw at the opening part of the progression, 4, 5, we see flat 6, which is very similar to 4, functionally speaking. B flat major is very similar to G minor, of course, and to 5, to 1. So that part of the progression is actually quite similar to the first 3 chords. And then from D minor, we go to this E7, very colorful chord because it has that C in the top voice. You know, which is like, if you're just thinking in terms of the chord by itself, you would think of that as probably as raised 5th or flat 13. But we're not just going to think of the chord by itself, we're thinking about where the chord's going. And so this is now, again, a 5 chord that's moving to resolve here to A minor, maybe A minor with a major 7. And then this moves to D minor. And that instance of D minor doesn't really feel like the 1 chord to my ear, and we want to trust our ears on these things. So in that context, in that position in the progression, it feels more like a 4 chord in relation to that A minor before it. Okay, so now we've found various points of resolution, right? So this D minor here feels like a point of resolution. B flat major kind of does, but also has dual function, which is continuing to move on to this point of resolution here, D minor. Then we have E7, another tension point, resolving to A minor. And then this D minor is kind of like a 4, which feels like an elaboration on that A minor section. So with all that said, now we want to work back. It's a beautiful progression. It's really brilliant the way it's constructed. And that's why people love playing on it. But now let's look at the dominant chords and how we're going to think about them. And in the last video, I talked about the idea of don't think in terms of an altered scale or anything like that, diminished scale, any of these types of scales. They're all available. Use what you want. But I want to think functionally. Before we start talking about superimposing different scales, I want to think about what's the inside choice. In other words, this music is based on key centers. We don't want to ignore that. We want to understand how that works. Okay, so, and what I was saying in the last video, and what I'll reiterate now, is that we're going to, on the dominant chord, we're going to play in the key that we're heading towards. In a sense, we're already there. So here we said this is 4, this is 5, and this is 1. G, A, D. And so we're going to be thinking D minor for that whole section, especially when we get to that A7 chord, the 5 chord in D minor. So here's an example. 4, 5 chord, and then over that, think D minor. Resolve. Okay, so the way I was thinking about it was actually not even playing melodic material over that first chord. Just let the first chord sit, because it's not about playing something over every chord. It's about playing a line that moves towards our point of resolution. You see that? And then we keep moving. Let's keep going. Now I'm going to play a line that moves towards B flat major. So here's C minor. So a little bit of a land on B flat. What's interesting about this also, though, is that if we look at the original melody over the B flat chord, it's this. All right, so that really traces D minor and kind of reinforces what I'm talking about. So we're thinking already in D minor over that B flat major chord. So now we get to this A7. And we are again going to think about playing into the key, which is D minor, over at the top of that over the top of that A7. Now E7. And over this, we're going to think about playing in A minor, heading towards A minor. And then we have the D minor, which feels like an extension of the A minor section. All right, so that covers what I wanted to get into for this section. So again, it's just first looking at the progression, figuring out where the resolution points are that we're playing towards harmony. So not just thinking from chord to chord and what scale goes with which chord, but thinking about where the chords are headed. Where's like the strong resolution points that we can move our lines towards. And with that in mind, think about really important point to make about that is where the line is heading towards. It's more important where it's heading towards than it is where it starts. And that's why when we do analyze things in this way, we can look at where we can actually leave space. We definitely don't need to fill in every single measure. That's like a big problem with a lot of people getting started with soloing, or people who have been playing for a long time. When we're just, especially when we're looking at a chart and thinking more about the way things look on a page in terms of chord symbols than we are thinking about the way things sound in terms of what the gravity is, the gravitational pull of the harmonic progression. So it's that, and then it's also thinking about over these dominant chords playing in the key that we're heading towards. So even though it says, A7 sharp 9 going to D minor, we don't need to get thrown off by seeing sharp 9 saying, oh, what scale goes with that? Is that, or it says sharp 9, does that go with altered scale? All this kind of thing. Over here is F7 flat 9. Well, what is that, a diminished? Don't worry about any of that. It's a question of where we're heading towards. Okay, A7 sharp 9 heading towards D minor, playing D minor. E7 sharp 9 heading towards A minor, even though it's A minor, maybe with this major 7, playing A minor. Play ideas from A minor. I really think we can get a lot out of that, and can make the music feel a lot more lyrical and with a sense of direction. So check that out. Love to hear any thoughts about any of that. And it's fun for me sharing this information, so I hope it's fun for folks to check it out. All right, we'll leave it there.